Okay, well, I'm George Roger Frank, and my connection with Anderson Island is 37 years ago, I came out here with a group of friends and started camping. One of them had, his father-in-law had bought a large chunk of the property and was developing it and selling off 5-acre plots, and we came down and stayed on one of the undeveloped plots and camped over a weekend, and there was a good 35 of us here, I think, that time. And
All
so for
servicemen?
37 years, I've been coming on and off to Anderson Island for good times, planned times, which were mostly guys' weekends, which would be 3 and 4 days in length, and we'd meet and reestablish friendships. I was just meeting these people because my wife knew them all from her youth, and I was meeting them, if you will. So that's how and when I came to Anderson Island. And so 13 years ago, my wife and I, we left Washington State to go to Texas and take up living down there in the heat and warmth and out of the cold. And Hurricane Harvey kind of woke us up here a couple of years ago. Went right over the top of our house, but didn't damage us terribly. Did a lot of our neighbors. And so at that time, Serena said she wanted to move back to Washington and get in with friends and family again. And so where would you like to move? Well, certainly not back to the city. Well, we found a piece of property on Anderson Island and said, that's it, that's the place to go. So here we are, 35 years after coming out here for the first time, enjoying life on Anderson Island. Joining the service, that was something else. I was young, in college at the time, had met my father for the first time in 14 years, and was staying with him and my stepmom at the time, just possibly for the summer, but started school. And my dad was an ex-submariner, and when my first grades came out on that first quarter, and he looked at them and he said, you know, B's and C's aren't exactly attractive. They're not bad, but they're not attractive. Are you sure you want to do this, or do you want to take some time and think about it? Well, probably, you know, as all kids, I said, let's take some time and think about it. And he said, well, maybe the best place for you would be in the service. And so at that time, I made my mind up and went into the service. And of course, I was trying to get away from schooling, and I signed up for nuclear power and ended up going to 2 years of schooling before I hit the fleet. Not exactly my plans.
Were you in ROTC at the...
No, at the school, no, I was just I was an athlete of sorts. First thing I knew about the service was, well, not the first thing, the second thing I found out about the service is my second week at boot camp, I got my draft notice. So it all worked out for me. I could send them a letter saying I can't come, and please excuse me, and my return address is boot camp San Diego. And that led to a lot of schooling from there. I went to schooling in Mare Island up in San Francisco area. And I went for my prototype in New Hampshire, and from that prototype I went to submarine school Groton and was finally got my assignment. And the first assignment I got was the 616 Lafayette, one patrol before she was due to go into dry dock for an overhaul. If I could qualify submarines, I could go with her. Busted my butt that first run and made submarines. Got my Dolphins. Went into overhaul, spent 1.25 years in Newport News, Virginia, next to the USS Kennedy as she was being built. I can remember that because we used to fire Coke cans out of our emergency projector at her. Some of the fun things you do when you're in the service, you know. Stand and watch on a submarine based in a dry dock like it's going to go someplace. Okay, well that was service time. I went from there. We were stationed out of South Carolina, Charleston. Flew to Rota, Spain for exchange of boats. After that overhaul and refueling, of course, I got a chance not a lot of submariners got to do. We went down to the Caribbean and we fired torpedoes, and we fired an SSBN. downrange. So I got to do both of those things.
What is an SSBN?
Ballistic missile,
Okay.
not sort. Anyway, fired from the subs. You know, we crack a cap on one of the missile tubes and fire her out of there. She floats. She kind of bubbles to the top, fires her engines, and off downrange. And then from there, I was in on the Lafayette Blue Crew. Of course, that was 60 days at sea, 90 days in port for schooling, and then 60 to 90 days on the boat, on and off until my 6-year tour was over and I got out. I kind of got tired of the boring routine of being on a boat and going in and out. And I made all of E5, all right for 6-year employment, and haven't regretted any of my life in the service. I've used my knowledge throughout. I was an electrician mate in the Navy, and I was an electrician on and off through the rest of my time. So my service duties, I kind of covered those. Taking care of batteries, running a throttle, maintaining electrical equipment, nothing big. I think the most memorable time on the boat, being deployed, is of course it was 42 degrees inlet temperature was what we got to see a lot. That was our Liberty. We did get Periscope Liberty. I never got one, but we took Periscope Liberty in the Mediterranean once. And we were followed by a Russian submarine for 3 days once. Lost him through the 6th Fleet. So that was nerve-wracking to say the least, and one of the most memorable parts of it. But other than that, nothing. They threw drills at us and scared the shit out of me a lot of times. The drills meaning they would throw us to battle stations and not tell us that it was a drill. And the only reason you go to battle stations on a nuclear missile submarine is to fire missiles that somebody has fired them at the U.S. I think I told Ray when I sat down, memorable service members. I cannot remember a single person's name except my first, and that was John. And see, I can't even pull his back. I knew it 2 days ago. I had it on the tip of my tongue, but it's gone. My family supported me in the service, of course, and now that I'm married, she supports me in being in the Legion. And I really can't think of much more to say about my service or anything. It's a long time ago. It was from 65 to 71, and it gave me an education from 71 to 75, and I guess it really set me off. I think I prove anyone who wants to go in the service, it's a good place to go. It's a good place to learn things.
Well, how far did you cruise?
Mediterranean. Other than that one short blast down to down into the Caribbean to do the missile shots and to do the torpedo runs out of Rosie Roads.
What is Rosie Roads?
Roosevelt Roads is one of the bases that we have down on St. Croix. I think it's St. Croix that Roosevelt Roads is on. That's where one of the bases that they have down there, where they can deploy submarines to do missile firing of torpedoes, have torpedo catchers. Other than that, it was kind of a good place to be, but I'm glad I'm out and was very happy to leave after 6 years.
Some of the stories we hear about life on a sub, is it true that you share a bunk with guys from the other ships?
No, actually, I was on an SSBN, that's a missile-carrying boomer, and we trade crews. We didn't exactly trade bunks while at sea. We traded crews when we came in. Kind of a cycle for an SSBN crew member is you get on an airplane and you fly to your destination where your boat is waiting. For us, it was over to Rota, Spain. And we'd come in there and we'd spend 30 days exchanging the boat from one crew to another crew.
Is that so that the oncoming crew can check everything out?
The oncoming
sure there's
crew
no
comes
problem?
in, learns what's wrong with the equipment, what's being repaired and why, what expectations are of getting all things ready to go, re-provisioning so that you have all of the food you're going to need for your 60 days, or 60, in our case 64, I think 68 was the longest we ever made for a run under the water. And normally it was to be about 60 to 63 days for a trip. And so during that 60 days, of course, you're on post, and most of us didn't know where that was. The submarine would be out running a line somewhere out in the Mediterranean at 50 foot or better depth. And they were in contact through a trailing wire. That brings up some stories, but so you would be 60 days under the water maintaining a post, and then you would come back in and do another 30-day exchange to the other crew, which would have flown in to meet you when you came into port.
Now, your time when you're
I was just going to
on
go to that. So when they took over and they took the boat, after that 30 days exchange, you'd get on an airplane and then fly back to the States to where your boat was headquartered. In our case, it was Charleston, South Carolina. And at that point, usually you would have 30 days or whatever to start using your leave time, so you could go visit your family, or you could take a break. Some guys would take off and go buy Corvettes and come back with their new cars and show them off, that kind of thing. And so you would then spend that period, it's actually a 90-day period, of which most was supposed to be education, in which you would do land-based education for your job, like to improve your rating or to improve your knowledge of what you're supposed to be doing or what you may be doing next. And everybody getting themselves brought up to speed on the newness of whatever may be, new codes, new assignments, new way of approaching how to maintain equipment, what new equipment we may have aboard. And then at the end of that 90 days, the early part, which is taking vacation and time off, and then your educational period at the base, you would then get in the airplane and fly back over to, in this case, Rota, Spain, to take over from the other crew. A lot of times, in this case, a bunch of my mates, we, four of us to an apartment, shared an apartment that we rented three months out of a time, but we had guys on the blue crew, the gold crew, 4 people, who rented the apartment on the other 3 months at a time, so that apartment never went empty. And we weren't exactly hot bunking, but it was like we traded bunks from one place to the other. On my submarine, everybody had their own berth. It was my bunky wunky was about 3 foot tall, 3 foot wide, 6 foot long, and it had a little locker that was about 2 foot by 3 foot by whatever, 3 foot did I say high? 3 by 3 by 2. That we store your books, your clothing, your poopy suit, which was an all one-piece climb-in nylon suit that we were supplied to us. That was our uniform for on board ship. So that was your basic overall routine of being on an SSBN. They brought thrills to us by running drills. Again, like I said, they would run battle stations drills, fire drills, that kind of thing to keep everyone up and posted. That would be at sea. Now this was the old days, folks. Our supply of entertainment was 162 8mm movies. The captain would release a movie a day. So you couldn't dive into the pile until the movie was released. After the movie was released one time, you could then watch it on any Saturday until the end of the cruise. But this was before, everybody had these little devices which, they can watch movies and entertain themselves for hours. It was, your entertainment was, there's a lot of games going on. Guys would be playing chess or cards or whatever with one another. The movies, like I said, were 8mm, so they had to be dispensed. But food was pretty good. Entertainment was what we made of it. And life wasn't bad. We had on board, we had like 8 to 10 officers. Had their own little section, and they had their wardrooms, which was nice for them. Our bunks were 3 deep on the outside skin of it was only 2 deep on the outside skin the sub. Inside there was a row for, you could walk, then inside, side by side with a wall between, another inside, a walkway, and another row of bunks. And then you would go to the other side of the ship, back to back, opposite, with walking spaces to get through, and then there were cross spaces at various points, so you could stick 100 and some guys down into an area that was about as big as Ray's living room here. That would be some of the educational processes. Did I answer your question on that? I think. That was kind of what I can remember of that. Getting into submarines, one of the memorial events is, of course, having to do the rise through the tower, which you do an escape, like you were actually leaving a submarine, pop an escape hatch and blow your way to the surface. And believe me, I never thought I could blow that long, but you can. It just keeps filling your lungs up. One of the interesting things about our floating wire antenna, which is how we communicated with the outside world, is we snagged a fisherman's float once and dragged it behind us for a day and a half. There we are, sneaking around the Mediterranean, pulling a big green fishing float on the surface behind us, until they finally cut that, which was, they sent UDT team out to try and cut it free, and they ended up having to cut the wire loose. So imagine having to pull out another, was it 1,000 yards of wire? I'm not sure how much that wire is drug behind the boat for communication, but I mean, they had to re-pull that wire out. I mean, that was quite a thing. Again, the time we were followed by a Russian submarine. This is high of the Cold War, so it's pretty. We ran silent. We were running around in cotton feet on socks, no shoes, no electricity was being used except for propulsion. So we were eating cold food for that 3 days. Everything quiet. I mean, they'd wake you up, tapping you on the shoulder, and you'd go man your post. That was a scary thing for us, or for me anyway. And like I said, the floating wire. But to lose that submarine, our captain finally got orders, I guess, to do is he went and found where the Sixth Fleet was doing maneuvers in the Mediterranean and took us right through them. The Russian guy didn't follow us, and then after we got through them, we went to the bottom and sat silent for a day. So it was our way of getting loose from being trailed. I was at sub school, submarine training, when one of the submarines, and I want to say it was the Blackfish, but again, my name is foggy here, it's 30-some years, surfaced underneath one of the carriers outside of Massachusetts, outside one of the harbors, and put a great big ding in his sail. When I say a great big ding, it was about 10 feet deep and about 8 foot across. And what I remember is I was down along the, for some reason I was down along the area where the docking, where the submarine was coming into dock, and it didn't meet it hadn't even gotten its lines over before the admiral was down on the dock with a, "You are relieved of your command. I want to see you in my office immediately." And that's when I thought, oh, this guy is in bad trouble for sure. I don't know what the end result was. It was just something at that point was very amusing for a E4 electrician watching what was going on. It's like, oh, they're serious here. So those are some of the little stories I can remember, and it made my service interesting, to say the least. And thank you for the opportunity to talk.
That was a good question.
I'm glad you brought.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us.
Sure.
And thank you for serving.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
It's, for me, a good deal.